The barrel of Ranger Miller's service pistol caught the afternoon sunlight as he aimed it at the dirt-covered boy kneeling in the dust. I said, "Put her down, you little piece of trash." Jax didn't move. Couldn't move. The girl in his arms, Sienna, was burning with fever, her breathing shallow and erratic. The twin puncture wounds on her calf had turned her leg into a swollen, discolored nightmare. Every second Miller wasted pointing that gun was a second closer to her death. "She's been bitten." Jax's voice cracked with desperation and exhaustion. "She needs a hospital. Now." Miller's lip curled in disgust. "What I see is a vagrant holding an unconscious girl miles from any trail. You think I'm stupid, boy? You drugged her, didn't you? Thought you'd have your fun out here where nobody could. I saved her life." Jax interrupted, his arms trembling under Sienna's weight. His twisted ankle screamed in protest, but he refused to collapse. Not yet. Not when she still had a chance. The Ranger's finger tightened on the trigger. "Last warning. Put her down." In the distance, a sound began to build. Low at first, then growing into a thunderous roar. The rumble of hundreds of motorcycle engines, getting closer with every heartbeat. Jax looked past Miller to the main highway, where a sea of leather and chrome was converging on their position. He didn't know who they were or why they were coming. He didn't know that the dying girl in his arms was Sienna King, the only daughter of Vance Viper King, president of the Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club. He didn't know that he'd just traded a life of hiding in the shadows for something far more dangerous and far more valuable than he could have ever imagined. All he knew was that if Miller didn't lower that gun in the next 10 seconds, the girl he'd carried 4 miles on a broken ankle was going to die. And then the motorcycles arrived. Jax had learned long ago that the key to survival in Blackwood National Forest wasn't strength or courage, it was invisibility. At 17, he perfected the art of becoming a ghost. He moved through the dense pine forests like smoke, leaving no trace of his passage. His camp was a careful assemblage of natural materials that could be scattered in 30 seconds if he heard the crunch of boots on the trail. His clothes were camouflage rags he'd salvaged from a dumpster behind a hunting store 3 towns over. Even his scent was calculated. He bathed in the cold streams weekly, used pine needles to mask his smell, and never cooked anything that would produce noticeable smoke. The morning of the day everything changed began like any other. Jax woke before dawn in his makeshift shelter, a cunningly concealed depression beneath a fallen oak tree, lined with pine boughs and covered with a camouflage tarp weighted down with rocks and branches. He lay still for 5 minutes, listening. Bird calls, normal. Whine through the trees, steady. No human sounds. He emerged carefully, scanning the forest with eyes that had learned to catch the smallest movement. Nothing. Good. His stomach growled, reminding him that yesterday's handful of blackberries and the trout he'd caught 2 days ago weren't enough. But food was secondary to safety. It always was. Jax made his way to his water cache, a series of plastic bottles he'd hidden in 3 separate locations, and drank deeply. Then he checked his snare line, a series of simple traps he'd set along rabbit runs deeper in the forest. 2 were empty, but the 3rd had caught a young rabbit. He dispatched it quickly and humanely, thanked it silently as his grandfather had taught him years ago, and field-dressed it with a knife he kept religiously sharp. He was wrapping the rabbit in leaves when he heard voices on the lower trail. Jax froze, every muscle tensed. The voices grew louder. 2 men, their footsteps heavy and careless. Through the trees, he could make out flashes of brown and green. Park rangers. His jaw tightened. Not just any rangers. He recognized one of the voices. Ranger Kevin Miller. Jax retreated silently into the undergrowth, the rabbit tucked under his arm. He found a vantage point behind a thick cluster of mountain laurel and watched. Miller appeared first, his broad frame moving with the swagger of someone who believed the forest belonged to him. The other ranger was younger, maybe mid-20s, clearly uncomfortable. And between them, hands zip-tied behind his back, was old Tom. Jax's chest constricted. Tom was another forest dweller, a Vietnam veteran in his 60s who'd been living rough for the past decade. He was harmless, gentle even, spending his days fishing and talking to the trees. Jax had shared food with him on occasion, though both men preferred solitude. "Please," Tom was saying, his voice tired. "I wasn't hurting anybody. I was just trespassing," Miller interrupted, shoving Tom forward hard enough that the old man stumbled. "Just breaking the law? Just making my park look like a homeless camp." "It's not your park," Tom said quietly. Miller's hand shot out, grabbing Tom by his threadbare jacket. "What did you say to me?" The younger ranger shifted uncomfortably. Miller, come on. We can just escort him out. Give him a warning. Shut up, Roberts. Miller's voice was cold. You're new here. You don't understand. These people, they're like rats. You show them mercy, and next thing you know, there's a whole colony of them. You have to make an example. Miller pulled Tom close, and Jack saw the fear in the old man's eyes. You're going to jail, Tommy boy. Maybe spend a few nights in county lockup. You'll learn to appreciate civilization. And when you get out, Miller smiled, and it was the ugliest expression Jax had ever seen. If I catch you in my forest again, I'll make sure they throw away the key. Tom said nothing. His shoulders sagged in defeat. Jax wanted to do something, wanted to leap out, to fight, to defend the only other person in these woods who understood what it meant to have nowhere else to go. But he was 17, barely 140 pounds, and Miller was armed. Jax had learned the hard way that heroes got hurt. Or worse, they got caught. And if Jax got caught, if he ended up in the system again, they'd send him back. Back to his uncle's house. Back to the bruises and the hunger in the locked basement. He'd die before he went back. So Jax did what he'd always done. He watched Miller drag old Tom away, memorizing every detail of the ranger's face, feeding his anger into a cold, controlled place deep in his chest where he kept all the injustices he couldn't fix. Someday, he promised himself. Someday, people like Miller would get what they deserved. But not today. When the rangers were gone, Jax returned to his camp. He built a tiny, smokeless fire using the Dakota Firehole method, a technique that burned hot and clean and cooked the rabbit. He ate mechanically, tasting nothing, his mind replaying Tom's defeat over and over. After he buried the bones and scattered his fire pit, Jax decided to move deeper into the forest. Miller would be on patrol for the next few days, energized by his latest catch. The deeper woods were dangerous, more wildlife, rougher terrain, fewer escape routes if something went wrong, but they were safer than anywhere Miller might look. Jax gathered his meager possessions, his knife, his water bottles, a length of paracord, a fire starter, and a tarp. Everything fit in a small backpack he'd found in a donation bin. He was traveling light, the way he liked it. By noon, he'd made his way into the canyon country on the eastern edge of the park. This was technical terrain, all steep slopes and loose scree, cut through with narrow ravines where water had carved channels through ancient stone. Most hikers avoided this area. Too difficult, too remote, too easy to get hurt. Perfect for him. Jax found a spot where a rockfall had created a natural shelter and was scouting for water sources when he heard it. A scream. High-pitched, terrified, and very, very human. It came from somewhere in the canyon below, echoing off the stone walls in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint. But Jax had spent enough time in these woods to triangulate sound. Southwest, maybe half a mile. Every instinct told him to ignore it. Getting involved with other people meant questions, attention, risk. It meant being seen. But the scream came again, and this time he heard the raw terror in it. Not anger, not surprise. Pure, primal fear. Jax thought of old Tom's defeated shoulders. He thought of all the times he'd been the one screaming and nobody had come. He was running before he made a conscious decision, his twisted ankle protesting every step, his breath coming hard as he navigated the treacherous slope. The scream had stopped, but Jax knew where to go now. He scrambled down a rocky draw, using roots and rocks for handholds, moving with the desperate speed of someone racing against time. He burst through a screen of scrub oak and into a small clearing at the bottom of a narrow canyon, and stopped dead. A girl lay in the dirt, maybe his age, wearing expensive hiking boots and athletic gear that probably cost more than everything Jax owned. Her blonde hair was matted with sweat and dust. She was writhing, one hand clutching her calf, the other scrabbling uselessly at the ground. 3 feet away, coiling back into a defensive posture, was a timber rattlesnake, thick-bodied, easily 4 feet long, its rattle a continuous angry buzz. Jax took in the scene in an instant. The disturbed rocks, the 2 dark puncture wounds on the girl's calf, already surrounded by spreading redness. The way her lips were turning blue. The snake, still agitated, ready to strike again if threatened. The girl's eyes found his, wide with panic and pain. She tried to speak, but only a choked gasp came out. Jax didn't hesitate. He grabbed a sturdy branch from the ground and moved forward in a smooth, controlled motion. The snake tracked him, rattle intensifying. When it struck, Jax was ready. He caught it just behind the head with the branch, pinning it to the ground. With his other hand, He drew his knife and severed the snake's head in one clean motion. The body continued to writhe. Jax kicked it away and turned to the girl. Her eyes were rolling back. Shock was setting in fast. Hey! Jax dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her leg. The bite was bad, really bad. Both fangs had penetrated deep, and the venom load from a snake that size would be massive. Hey, stay with me. What's your name? Sienna, she managed, her voice weak. It hurts. Oh God, it hurts so much. I know it does. Jax's mind was racing. They were in a dead zone. No cell signal, miles from the nearest trail, at least 3 hours from the ranger station, even if he ran the whole way. And this girl didn't have 3 hours. The venom was already working. Her leg was swelling visibly, the skin around the bite turning dark purple and black. Neurotoxins and hemotoxins, attacking her nervous system and destroying her blood cells simultaneously. If he didn't do something, she'd go into shock, her respiratory system would fail, and she'd die right here in this canyon. Jax looked at her face. She was crying now, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. She was someone's daughter. Someone who probably had a family looking for her, a life waiting for her. She was everything Jax wasn't: clean, cared for, loved. And she was going to die unless he did something incredibly stupid and dangerous. Listen to me, Jax said, gripping her shoulder. Listen, I'm going to help you, but you need to stay conscious. Can you do that? Can you stay awake for me? Sienna nodded weakly. Jax pulled out his knife and held it over his fire starter. The books said not to do what he was about to do. The wilderness medicine guides, the first aid manuals, they all said suction didn't work, that it could cause infection, that it might make things worse. But those books assumed you could get to a hospital in time. They assumed anti-venom and 4 fluids and trained medical staff. Out here, Jax had none of that. All he had was his knife, his mouth, and his willingness to risk his own life for a stranger. He heated the blade until it glowed faintly, then let it cool just enough to touch. This is going to hurt, he warned. Then he made 2 small, shallow cuts across the puncture wounds. Sienna screamed, her back arching. I'm sorry, Jax muttered. He bent down, put his mouth over the wound, and began to suck. The taste was immediate and terrible. Blood and something else, something bitter and wrong that made his tongue go numb almost instantly. He sucked hard, drawing as much fluid as he could, then turned his head and spat. Again and again. His lips were tingling now, going numb. His gums ached. He knew he was absorbing some of the venom through the mucous membranes in his mouth, knew that if he had any cuts or sores, he could poison himself. But he kept going. Suck, spit, suck, spit. After 30 seconds, Jax had to stop. His whole mouth was numb, and his vision was starting to blur at the edges. He'd taken on too much. He sat back, gasping, and spat repeatedly, trying to clear his mouth. Am I going to die? Sienna whispered. Jax looked at her leg. The swelling had slowed, but not stopped. He'd removed some of the venom, maybe 20%, if he was lucky, but it wasn't enough. Not if I can help it, he said. He tore a strip from his shirt and tied it around her leg above the bite. Not tight enough to cut off circulation completely, but enough to slow the spread of venom to her core. Then he looked around the canyon, calculating. They needed to get to higher ground, to the main trail where cell service might be possible. That meant climbing out of this ravine. Can you walk? He asked. Sienna tried to stand. She got halfway up before her leg buckled, and she collapsed with a cry of pain. Okay. Jax pulled her arm over his shoulder and tried to support her weight. She was taller than him, heavier, and his ankle was already protesting from the run down here. They made it 5 feet before Sienna's leg gave out completely. Jax lowered her back to the ground. His mind was working frantically. The venom was spreading. Her symptoms were getting worse. Her breathing was becoming labored, her skin clammy. They were running out of time. There was only one option. I'm going to carry you, Jax said. You can't. Sienna's protest was cut off by a wave of pain. I don't have a choice. Jax positioned himself and, with a grunt of effort, lifted her into a fireman's carry across his shoulders. The world tilted dangerously. Sienna was at least 120, maybe 130, and Jax was already exhausted. His ankle screamed in protest, a sharp, stabbing pain that made him gasp. But he started walking anyway. The first 100 yards were the worst. Jax's ankle felt like someone was driving a spike through it with every step. His shoulders burned under Sienna's weight. Sweat poured into his eyes, stinging and blinding. The rocky terrain that he'd navigated so easily on the way down became a nightmare obstacle course. But he kept moving. Stay awake, he said through gritted teeth. Talk to me, Sienna. Tell me something. Hurts, she mumbled against his shoulder. Everything hurts. I know, but you need to stay conscious. Tell me. Tell me why you were out here alone. A long pause. Jax was afraid she'd passed out, but then she spoke, her voice slurred. Wanted to prove I could. Dad always says I need protection. Guards. Like I'm made of glass. Your dad sounds protective. A weak laugh. He's overprotective. Won't let me do anything. Wanted to show him. I could take care of myself. Jax stumbled over a loose rock and nearly fell. He caught himself on a tree trunk, gasping, then pushed forward. Yeah, well, maybe listen to your dad next time. Are you lecturing me? Despite everything, there was a hint of indignation in her voice. Little bit. Jax's foot slipped on some scree and his bad ankle twisted. White-hot pain shot up his leg, and he bit back a scream. He went down on one knee, barely managing to keep Sienna from hitting the ground. Sorry, he gasped. Sorry, just give me a second. Put me down, Sienna said. You can't. Not happening. Jax forced himself back to his feet. His vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges. He'd been in the wilderness for months, living on sparse rations. He wasn't strong enough for this. His body was already near its limit. But his mind kept going back to old Tom, hands zip-tied, shoulders defeated. Kept thinking about all the times no one had helped him when he needed it most. Not this time. This time, someone would make it out. Tell me more, Jax said, forcing one foot in front of the other. About your dad. What does he do? Sienna was quiet for so long that Jax thought she'd lost consciousness. Then, he's the president. Of what? The Iron Serpents. The name meant nothing to Jax, but he filed it away. Sounds important. It's a motorcycle club. Her words were getting more slurred. Biggest one in the state. Dad's, he's kind of a big deal. Jax's legs were shaking now, muscles burning with lactic acid. They'd been climbing for 20 minutes, maybe more, and he'd covered perhaps a quarter mile. At this rate, they'd never make it to the main trail before. He pushed the thought away. They would make it. They had to. What's your name? Sienna asked suddenly. Jax. That's a cool name. Like the weapon. My mom liked Shakespeare. The words came out before he could stop them. He never talked about his mother. Never. Where's your mom now? Dead. Been dead for 6 years. Jax's voice was flat, emotionless. Can we talk about something else? Sorry. Sienna's hand moved weakly, patting his shoulder. I'm sorry, Jax. They walked in silence for a while. The only sounds Jax's labored breathing and the crunch of his boots on stone. The sun was past its zenith now, the afternoon heat oppressive. Jax's mouth was dry, his water bottles back at his abandoned camp. His vision was starting to blur at the edges, not from venom now, but from exhaustion and dehydration. His ankle was on fire. Every step sent shockwaves of pain up his leg. Jax! Sienna's voice was faint. I'm really tired. I know. Stay with me. My leg doesn't hurt anymore. Is that good? Fear spiked through Jax's chest. Numbness meant the venom was affecting her nerves. How's your breathing? Can you breathe okay? It's hard. Like there's a weight on my chest. The venom was affecting her respiratory system. They were running out of time. Jax looked up. Through the trees ahead, he could see a break in the canopy. The ranger trail, maybe 200 yards away. So close. But 200 yards might as well be 2 miles the way his body was failing. He took another step. His ankle gave out completely, and this time he couldn't catch himself. He fell hard, twisting at the last second to take the impact on his shoulder instead of crushing Sienna beneath him. They hit the ground in a tangle of limbs. Jax's head cracked against a rock, and stars exploded across his vision. Jax! Sienna's voice seemed to come from far away. Jax, are you? I'm okay, he lied. Blood was running down the side of his face. He could feel it, warm and wet. I'm okay. Just need a minute. But they didn't have a minute. Sienna's breathing was becoming more labored, a rattling sound in her chest that terrified him. Jax forced himself to his hands and knees. The world spun violently. He closed his eyes, fighting down nausea, then opened them and focused on Sienna. Her lips were blue. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Her eyes were half closed. No, Jax said. No. Sienna, stay awake. Look at me. Her eyes fluttered open. Tired, she whispered. I know, but you can't sleep. Not yet. Jax got his arms under her again, lifted her with strength he didn't know he had left. His ankle was useless now, just a source of screaming pain. He limped forward, dragging his right foot. His entire focus narrowed to a single goal. The trail. 150 yards. 100 yards. 50. The trees opened up, and Jack stumbled onto the ranger trail. Gravel crunched under his feet. He looked left and right, searching for any sign of help, but the trail was empty in both directions. Of course it was. They were miles from the popular hiking areas. Jack's legs were trembling so badly he could barely stand. He needed to get Sienna to a road, somewhere with cell service, somewhere help could reach them. He had no idea which direction to go, and that's when he heard the engine. The sound of the truck engine was the most beautiful thing Jax had ever heard. He turned toward it, saw the Green Park Service vehicle rounding the bend about 50 yards away, and felt relief flood through him. Help! Finally, help! He staggered toward the truck, waving his free arm frantically. Hey, stop. We need help. The truck's brakes screeched. The door flew open, and Ranger Kevin Miller stepped out, his hand already on his service weapon. Jax's relief turned to ice in his veins. Miller's eyes went from Jax to the unconscious girl in his arms, and his face twisted into an expression of disgust and suspicion. Well, what do we have here? She's been bitten, Jax said immediately, the words tumbling out in a rush. Rattlesnake, timber, maybe 45 minutes ago. She's going into shock. She needs a hospital now. Put her down. Miller's hand was on his pistol, thumb releasing the safety strap. Put her down right now, boy. What? No. We don't have time. I said put her down. Miller drew his weapon, aimed it at Jax's chest. Step away from the girl. Hands where I can see them. Jax stood frozen, his mind refusing to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. Miller could see Sienna was injured, could see they needed help. Why was he? Are you deaf? Miller advanced, his gun steady. I know what this looks like. I know what you homeless freaks do. You saw a pretty girl hiking alone and thought you'd have some fun, didn't you? Well, you picked the wrong park. Trash. Understanding crashed over Jax like a bucket of ice water. Miller didn't see someone saving a life. He saw a dirty, homeless boy holding an unconscious girl. He saw what he wanted to see. No, Jax said, keeping his voice as steady as he could manage. No, that's not what happened. There was a snake. I cut the wound. I sucked out some of the venom. You cut her. Miller's eyes went wide. You expect me to believe you cut this girl to help her? Look at her leg. You can see the bite marks, the swelling. What I see is a vagrant who assaulted a young woman and is now making up stories. Miller gestured with the gun. Last chance. Put her down and get on your knees, hands behind your head. Jax looked at Sienna. Her breathing was worse, each breath a struggled gasp. Her lips were going from blue to purple. She was dying. Right here, right now, she was dying. And Miller was wasting time. Please, Jax said, and he hated how his voice broke. Please, I'm begging you. Look at her. She needs help. We can sort this all out later, but right now she needs a hospital or she's going to die. Should have thought of that before you attacked her. Miller pulled a radio from his belt. Roberts, this is Miller. I need backup at mile marker 42 on the East Ridge Trail. I've got a homeless suspect in custody and a female victim who appears to have been assaulted. Call for an ambulance, but don't rush. She's not going anywhere. Not rushing. Jax felt something snap inside him. She has minutes. Maybe less. Shut up. Miller stepped closer, gun aimed at Jax's head now. Down. On. Your. Knees. Jax's mind was racing. Miller wasn't going to help. He was going to waste time cuffing Jax, processing him like a criminal, while Sienna died. The ambulance would take at least 30 minutes to get here, probably longer. Sienna didn't have 30 minutes. Jax looked down the trail. Miller's truck was right there, keys probably still in the ignition. The main highway was maybe 10 miles away. At highway speeds, they could be at a hospital in 20 minutes. But that meant going through Miller. The ranger seemed to read his thoughts. Don't even think about it, boy. I will shoot you. You might be fast, but you're not faster than a bullet. She's dying. Jax said, one last desperate plea. Can't you see that? She's dying right in front of you. Then you should have called for help instead of assaulting her. Something in Miller's voice, the absolute certainty, the casual cruelty, made Jax realize the truth. Miller didn't care if Sienna lived or died. All he cared about was being right, about punishing the homeless kid who dared to exist in his forest. Old Tom's defeated shoulders. The way Miller had smiled when he promised to make an example of him. Not this time. Jax made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He shifted his weight, adjusting Sienna across his shoulders. I'm sorry, he said quietly. He wasn't sure if he was apologizing to Sienna for what he was about to do, or to Miller for what he was about to become. Then he charged. Miller's eyes widened. He squeezed the trigger, But Jax had already committed, his exhausted body finding one last burst of speed fueled by pure desperation. The gun roared, deafening in the quiet forest, and Jax felt the bullet pass close enough to his ear that he heard the crack of displaced air. Then he hit Miller like a linebacker, his shoulder driving into the Ranger's midsection. They went down in a tangle. Jax felt Miller's gun hand coming around, tried to twist away, but his ruined ankle betrayed him and he fell awkwardly. Miller rolled on top of him, raising the gun. Jax grabbed a handful of gravel and dirt and flung it into Miller's face. The Ranger recoiled, blinded, and Jax brought his knee up hard into Miller's groin. Miller made a sound like all the air leaving a balloon and collapsed sideways. Jax scrambled to his feet, his vision swimming, pain radiating from a dozen points on his body. Sienna had rolled off his shoulders during the fight. She lay motionless in the dirt, her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. No time. No time. Jax scooped her up again, ignoring the way his body screamed in protest, and ran for the truck. Behind him, Miller was gasping, trying to recover, reaching for his gun. Jax yanked open the truck door and laid Sienna across the bench seat as gently as he could. The keys were in the ignition, thank God. He climbed in, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. Miller was on his feet now, gun raised. Stop. Stop right now, or I will. Jax slammed the truck into drive and floored the accelerator. The rear tires spun on the gravel, caught, and the truck lurched forward. In the rearview mirror, Jax saw Miller running after them, heard the crack of another gunshot. The back window exploded, showering them with safety glass. Then they were around the bend, and Miller was lost from sight. Jax gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands, his foot heavy on the gas pedal. The truck bounced and swayed on the rough trail, and he had to fight to keep it under control. His vision kept trying to blur at the edges, exhaustion and dehydration and possibly mild venom poisoning all catching up with him. But he couldn't stop. Not yet. Hang on, Sienna, he said, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him anymore. Just hang on a little longer. We're almost there. He had no idea if that was true. He'd never driven this road before, had no idea how far it was to the highway. All he could do was keep his foot down and pray that help was closer than it seemed. The minutes stretched out like hours. The trail wound through the forest, each curve a potential disaster at the speed Jax was driving. Twice he nearly lost control on loose gravel. Once he clipped a tree branch that left a deep scratch along the passenger side. But gradually, the trail began to widen. The surface improved from rough gravel to maintained dirt to, finally, asphalt. And then he saw it. The main highway, a ribbon of gray cutting through the green wilderness. Jax didn't slow down. He hit the highway at 40 miles an hour, the truck's tires screaming as he made the turn. A car coming from the opposite direction blared its horn and swerved. Jax didn't care. He accelerated, pushing the truck to 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. He had no idea which direction led to the nearest hospital, so he just kept going, kept moving, kept. The wall of motorcycles appeared so suddenly that Jax almost didn't react in time. They were stretched across both lanes of the highway, dozens of them. No, hundreds. All black leather and chrome, engines rumbling like thunder. Jax slammed on the brakes. The truck's anti-lock system kicked in, the vehicle shuddering as it fought for traction. They skidded to a stop maybe 20 feet from the blockade. For a moment, everything was silent except for the rumble of hundreds of motorcycle engines. Then the riders began to dismount. Jax's hands were still locked on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. Through the windshield, he watched as the wall of bikers parted and one man walked forward. He was big, maybe 6'3", heavily muscled, wearing a leather vest that marked him as someone important. His face was weathered and hard, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. As he approached the stolen Ranger truck, every biker's attention was locked on him, waiting for his signal. Jax's mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. This many bikers, all coordinated, all here, it wasn't a coincidence. They were looking for something, looking for someone. The man reached the driver's side door. His hand went to his belt, and Jax saw the pistol there, saw the way his fingers rested on it casually, the way someone might rest their hand on a familiar tool. Step out of the vehicle, the man said. His voice was deep, controlled, but with an edge of barely restrained violence beneath it. Slowly, hands where I can see them. Jax's door was already damaged from when he'd clipped that tree branch. He had to shoulder it hard to get it open. When he stepped out, his ruined ankle nearly gave way immediately. He caught himself on the door frame, gasping. The biker's eyes, still hidden behind those dark glasses, tracked the movement. Where is she? Who? Jax's voice came out as a croak. His throat was desert dry. Don't play games with me, kid. The man took a step closer, and now Jax could see his reflection in those sunglasses. A dirty, bleeding, exhausted boy who looked more like a corpse than a person. We've been tracking her phone for the last 2 hours. The signal's been moving with this truck for the last 20 minutes. Where is she? Understanding dawned. The phone. Sienna must have had her phone on her, and these people, whoever they were, had been tracking it. She's in the truck, Jax said. Back seat. She's. The man moved faster than someone his size should have been able to. He was at the passenger door in 3 strides, yanking it open. When he saw Sienna lying across the bench seat, unconscious and barely breathing, he went absolutely still. Sienna. The single word was barely a whisper, but it carried more emotion than a scream. The man's hands were shaking as he reached for her, then pulled back, afraid to touch her. Baby girl. Baby, can you hear me? Jax suddenly understood who this man was. The president. The father. Viper. 2 more bikers appeared at Viper's shoulders, and one of them, a lean man with a scarred face, pulled out a phone. I'm calling it in. We need a... He stopped, looking at Sienna's leg, seeing the swollen, discolored flesh, the crude bandage, the cuts Jax had made. Jesus Christ. What happened to her? Rattlesnake, Jax said. He had to lean against the truck to stay upright. Timber, big one. Bit her maybe an hour ago. I tried to extract the venom, but... You tried to what? The scarred man turned on Jax, his face twisted with fury. You cut her? You cut my president's daughter. I didn't have a choice. Jax's voice cracked. We were miles from help. No cell service. She was going into shock. Reaper. Viper's voice cut through the growing confrontation like a knife. Call the ambulance. Now. Reaper, the scarred man, hesitated for a moment, still glaring at Jax, then pulled out his phone. Viper carefully, gently lifted Sienna from the truck. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering. Dad, I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're going to be okay. The boy. Sienna mumbled, her words slurred. Jax. He saved me. Viper looked at Jax over Sienna's head. For the first time since he'd arrived, he removed his sunglasses, and Jax saw his eyes, dark brown, filled with a complex mix of emotions Jax couldn't begin to parse. Tell me what happened, Viper said. All of it. So Jax did. He talked while Viper held his daughter, while other bikers formed a protective circle around them, while someone produced a blanket to keep Sienna warm, and someone else brought water that Jax drank so fast he nearly choked on it. He told them about finding her, about the snake, about the desperate decision to try extraction. He told them about carrying her, about reaching the trail, about... The roar of another engine interrupted him. A second Park Service truck came around the bend, moving fast. It skidded to a stop behind the stolen one. Ranger Miller got out, his uniform disheveled, his face bruised where Jax had hit him. His eyes went wide when he saw the assembled bikers, but he'd committed to his course of action and was too arrogant to back down now. Thank God, Miller said, reaching for his radio. I need to report. You need to shut your mouth, Viper said quietly, before I shut it for you. Miller blinked. Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I'm a law enforcement officer, and I have a suspect in custody who... You have nothing, Viper interrupted. What you have is about 5 seconds to explain to me why my daughter's rescuer was driving a stolen Park Service vehicle with a bullet hole in the window. Miller's face went through several shades of red. That boy assaulted me. He stole my vehicle. He was holding your daughter against her will. He was saving her life while you pointed a gun at him. Viper's voice dropped even lower, becoming almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. Sienna told me everything. She told me how this boy risked his own life to extract venom from her leg, how he carried her for miles on a broken ankle, how he begged you for help and you threatened to shoot him. That's not. I didn't. She's delirious from the venom. Miller was backing away now, finally reading the danger in the situation. She doesn't know what she's saying. Viper handed Sienna carefully to Reaper, then stood and walked toward Miller. Every biker in the vicinity went silent, watching. You know what I hate? Viper said conversationally. I hate snakes. Always have. Nasty, sneaky things. They hide in the dark and bite without warning. My daughter nearly died because of a snake today. Miller took another step back. His hand went to his gun. 50 bikers moved in response, hands going to their own weapons. Miller froze. But you know what I hate more than snakes? Viper continued. I hate men who hide behind badges to hurt people. Men who see a kid trying to save a life and decide to make it about their own ego. Men who would let a 17-year-old girl die because they were too proud to admit they might be wrong. In the distance, Jax could hear sirens. The ambulance Reaper had called was getting close. "You're going to stand right there," Viper said to Miller, "and you're going to watch while the EMTs work on my daughter. And when they're done, when they've confirmed that she's going to live, you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about your future in law enforcement." Understood. Miller's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The ambulance arrived in a screech of tires and flashing lights. Paramedics poured out, and Reaper quickly briefed them on Sienna's condition. Within seconds, they had her on a gurney, and 4 in her arm, oxygen on her face. "Rattlesnake bite, approximately 60 to 70 minutes ago," one of the paramedics said, examining her leg. "Significant envenomation, but someone did field extraction." He looked up, scanning the crowd. "Who administered first aid?" Jax raised his hand weakly. The paramedic's eyes widened when he saw Jax's condition, the blood on his face, the way he could barely stand, the swelling in his ankle. "You did this? You cut the wound and performed suction?" "Yes. That's not recommended procedure." "I know. We were 3 hours from help. She was dying." The paramedic paused, then nodded slowly. "You might have saved her life. That venom load should have killed her by now. The extraction probably bought her enough time." He turned to his partner. "Get another gurney. This kid needs medical attention too." "I'm fine," Jax protested, even as his vision started to gray at the edges. "You have venom in your system. I can see it in your eyes, the numbness in your lips. You need to be observed." The paramedic grabbed Jax's arm to steady him. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday. Maybe the day before." "Great. Malnutrition, dehydration, possible envenomation," and he touched the cut on Jax's head, a head injury. "You're a mess, kid. Get on the gurney." Jax wanted to argue, but his body had reached the end of its rope. The moment the paramedics lowered the gurney, his legs gave out and he collapsed onto it. The world started to swim in and out of focus. He was vaguely aware of being loaded into the ambulance, a Viper's face appearing above him. "We're going to follow you to the hospital," Viper said. "When you wake up, you and I are going to have a talk." "Miller," Jax tried to warn him. "Miller isn't your problem anymore. He's mine." That should have been ominous, threatening even. But Jax found he couldn't care. Sienna was safe. That was all that mattered. The ambulance doors closed, and Jax let himself sink into the darkness. Jax woke up to the sound of machines beeping and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment, panic seized him. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant social services. Social services meant his uncle. "Easy, kid. You're safe." Jax's eyes flew open. He was in a hospital room, and 4 in his arm, monitors attached to his chest. And sitting in a chair beside his bed, looking like he'd been there for hours, was Viper. "Sienna?" Jax croaked out, his throat still raw. "Alive. In the ICU, but stable. They gave her anti-venom, fluids, the works. Doctors say she'll make a full recovery." Viper leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Thanks to you." Jax processed this, relief flooding through him. "How long have I been out?" "About 8 hours. You had secondary venom exposure, severe dehydration, exhaustion, a mild concussion, and a fractured ankle. The doctors wanted to keep you sedated while they worked on you." Viper paused. "They also told me you've been malnourished for months." "That true?" Jax didn't answer. He was too busy looking around the room for exits, for his clothes, for anything that might help him disappear before the inevitable questions came. "Relax," Viper said, reading his body language. "No one's called social services. No one's called the police. Well, not the regular police. We had a different kind of law enforcement discussion with Ranger Miller." "What did you do to him?" A ghost of a smile crossed Viper's face. "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're worried about. But let's just say Miller won't be working for the Park Service anymore. We have lawyers, good ones. They're very interested in a ranger who pulled a gun on a minor providing medical assistance, who fired shots at a vehicle containing an injured girl, who obstructed rescue efforts." He paused. "Miller's going to be lucky if he avoids charges himself." Jax absorbed this. "Why are you still here?" "Because I owe you a debt," Viper said simply. "You saved my daughter's life. You risked your own life, multiple times, for someone you didn't even know. That means something in my world. I don't want anything." "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." Viper stood, walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot where dozens of motorcycles were still parked. "Sienna told me some things while we were waiting for you to wake up. Told me about what you said while you were carrying her. About your mom being dead. About living in the forest. Jax's jaw tightened. I'm not going back. Back to where? Wherever social services wants to send me. Foster care, my uncle's house. Doesn't matter. I'm 17. I can take care of myself. In the forest? Living on berries and rabbits. Viper turned back to face him. Kid, you were starving. Another month, and you would have been too weak to hunt. What then? I would have figured something out. Stubborn. Viper shook his head. Sienna gets that from me. Can't tell her anything either. He pulled the chair closer to Jax's bed and sat down again. Here's the thing, Jax. You saved my daughter. That's not something I can just walk away from. So I'm going to make you an offer, and I want you to actually think about it before you refuse. I don't want charity. This isn't charity. This is how my world works. You did something for me, something huge. Now I do something for you. It's called balance. Viper pulled out his phone, showed Jax a photo. It was a small apartment, modest but clean. This is above our garage at the clubhouse. It's empty. It's yours if you want it. No rent, no strings. You want to come and go, fine. You want to be left alone, we'll leave you alone. Jax stared at the photo, not trusting himself to speak. There's more, Viper continued. We own a motorcycle shop. We could use someone who knows how to work with his hands, who understands engines. It's real work, real pay. You'd have to get your GED, finish school. That's non-negotiable. But after that, if you wanted to learn the trade. He trailed off, letting the offer hang in the air. Why? Jax finally managed. Why would you do this for me? Because Sienna was right about one thing. I am overprotective. I see danger everywhere. I've spent 17 years trying to keep her safe from the world. Viper's voice roughened with emotion. And when she finally faced real danger, when she really needed help, it wasn't me who saved her. It wasn't my security team or my connections or my money. It was a homeless kid with nothing who gave everything. He stood up, walked to the door, then turned back. You showed me something today, Jax. You showed me that character isn't about what you have. It's about what you do when it counts. My daughter's alive because you have more character in your little finger than most men have in their whole body. He paused. The iron serpents take care of their own. And as of today, whether you accept my offer or not, you're one of ours. You need something, anything, you call me. Understood. Jax felt something crack in his chest, some wall he built up over years of being alone, being unwanted, being invisible. I don't know how to be around people, he said quietly. I've been alone so long. That's okay. We'll teach you. Viper pulled a card from his pocket and set it on Jax's bedside table. That's my number. Call me when you're released. I'll come get you, show you the apartment. No pressure. Just think about it. He started to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Jax. Thank you. For my daughter. For not giving up on her when Miller was pointing that gun at you. Thank you for being the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. After he left, Jax lay in the quiet hospital room, staring at the card on the bedside table. Outside, he could hear motorcycles starting up, the rumble of engines fading as the iron serpents finally left. For the first time in months, maybe years, Jax let himself imagine something other than just surviving. He imagined a bed that wasn't made of pine boughs, food that wasn't scavenged, work that meant something, people who might actually care if he lived or died. He imagined a future. It was terrifying. It was also the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. 2 days later, Jax stood in front of a 3-story building on the outskirts of the city, Viper beside him. The sign out front read, Iron Serpents MC, in bold letters. The parking lot was full of motorcycles, all black and chrome, all immaculate. Ready? Viper asked. Jax wasn't sure he'd ever be ready, but he nodded anyway. The clubhouse was exactly what Jax had expected and nothing like it at the same time. Yes, there was leather and tattoos and the rumble of rough voices. But there was also laughter, the smell of someone cooking burgers, kids, actual children, running around while their fathers watched football on a massive TV. This way, Viper led him through the main room, where conversations stopped and heads turned to watch them pass, and up a set of external stairs to the apartment above the garage. The space was small but perfect. One room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and large windows that let in afternoon light. The bed was made. The fridge was stocked. Someone had even left clothes in the closet, all in roughly Jax's size. Sienna picked out the clothes, Viper said, following Jax's gaze. She's still in the hospital, but she's going to be released tomorrow. She wanted to thank you herself. She doesn't need to thank me. Try telling her that. She's as stubborn as her old man. Viper walked to the window, looked down at the clubhouse. I should tell you something. The guys downstairs, they know what you did. They know you saved my daughter. But that's going to cause some complications. What kind of complications? The respectful kind. The annoying kind. Viper turned back to Jax. You're 17, no family, no home. Legally, I can't just adopt you. It doesn't work like that. But in the club, you're already family. Some of the guys are going to want to treat you like a prospect, teach you the ropes. Others are going to want to protect you because you're young. It's going to be a lot. Jax thought about the forest, about the isolation, about being invisible. I can handle a lot. Yeah. Viper smiled. I think you can. Over the next few weeks, Jax discovered what it meant to be part of the Iron Serpents. It meant Reaper teaching him how to rebuild a carburetor at the shop. It meant Sunday dinners where 20 bikers and their families crowded around picnic tables. It meant nobody asking where he'd come from or why he flinched at sudden movements. It meant belonging. Sienna was released from the hospital and came to visit him 3 days later. She was thinner, still healing, using a cane to keep weight off her injured leg. But she was alive, vibrant, already making plans to go back to school. I'm going to be more careful, she told Jax, sitting in his small apartment drinking the tea he'd made. But I'm not going to stop. Dad wants to wrap me in bubble wrap, but I can't live like that. Just maybe don't hike alone in Snake Country anymore. She laughed. Deal. And Jax, thank you. Dad told me what you went through, what you risked. I don't have words for what that means to me. You don't need words, Jax said. You're alive. That's enough. A month later, Jax was officially enrolled in a GED program. 2 months after that, he passed his test and started working full-time at the motorcycle shop. Viper was true to his word. He paid well, taught him the trade, never made him feel like he owed anything. But Jax wanted to give something back. 6 months after the snake bite, Jax approached Viper with an idea. I want to do something. About the homeless people in the park. What kind of something? Miller's gone, but there are others like him. And there are people like old Tom, who just need a hand. I thought, maybe the club could help? Not charity, but jobs. Training. A way out. Viper looked at Jax for a long moment, then smiled. You know what? Let's talk to the board. The Iron Serpents outreach program started small. A few jobs at the shop, some donated camping gear for those who refused to come inside. But it grew. Within a year, they'd helped 15 people transition from homelessness to housing. Within 2, it was 50. And Jax, who'd once been invisible, became the face of the program. The boy who'd saved a biker's daughter and turned his pain into purpose. On the first anniversary of Sienna's snake bite, the club threw a party. Sienna was there, healthy and strong, already making plans to study wildlife management in college. Viper made a speech about family and loyalty and second chances. And Jax, wearing his prospect cut, the leather vest that marked him as one step away from full membership in the Iron Serpents, stood among his brothers and felt something he'd never expected to feel again. He felt home. 3 years later, Ranger Kevin Miller sat in a small apartment on the other side of the state, unemployed and unemployable. The Park Service had terminated him. The lawsuits from the Iron Serpents lawyers had cost him everything. His career was over, his reputation destroyed. But none of that hurt as much as the photo he'd seen on the news last week. It showed Jax, no longer a skinny homeless kid, but a broad-shouldered young man of 20, cutting the ribbon on a new homeless services center. Beside him stood Viper and Sienna. The caption talked about the Iron Serpents outreach program, about second chances and community. Miller had tried to destroy that kid. And instead, that kid had become everything Miller had pretended to be, a genuine helper, a real hero. The irony wasn't lost on him. Meanwhile, back at the Iron Serpents clubhouse, Jax sat with Viper on the back deck, watching the sun set over the mountains. His full cut, no longer a prospect, but a patched member, hung on his shoulders with comfortable weight. You did good, kid, Viper said. Your mom would be proud. Jax thought about that day in the canyon, about Sienna's fear and his desperation, about the choice he'd made to run toward danger instead of away from it. I learned something that day, Jax said quietly. When I found Sienna, I learned that sometimes the biggest danger isn't what you face. It's what you become if you don't face it. If I'd walked away, if I'd stayed hidden, I'd have been safe. But I'd have lost something more important than safety. What's that? Myself. Viper nodded slowly. That's the thing about venom, Jax. It doesn't just poison your body. It tests your character. Shows you who you really are when everything's on the line. He raised his beer bottle. To venom and valor. Jax clinked his bottle against Viper's. To family, Viper agreed. And in that moment, Watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jax understood something fundamental. He'd started that day trying to save Sienna's life, but in the end, she'd saved his too. The difference between venom and valor wasn't about the poison in your veins. It was about what you chose to do while it was there. And Jax had chosen well.